friends, it's Carly, and welcome to another episode of the I Learned podcast. So glad you're here. I'm so glad I'm here. We're here, and we get to settle in, get to get comfortable, and we get to enjoy this time. We get to enjoy this space. And I am in a very magical place today and yesterday, and kind of just in my life right now. So, as usual, the better I feel, the more I want to milk it for all it's worth and practice this good feeling vibration. So I'm just gonna open up and go with the flow and see where this beautiful energy leads us. I have no doubt that it will unfold exactly as it is meant to, for my highest good and the highest good of you listening. So I trust that. I do. I trust that everything is always working out for me. And being able to trust that feels like a spiritual wealth or abundance that I've never known before, of this well-being and this inner security of my own well-being, of my own connection through my inner being to source energy, like the source energy that connects us all. Knowing my own connection in a way where I know my own well-being. I know that everything is always working out for me. I know that that's true for all of us. And I know that each of our realities is a reflection of how much we know that for ourselves. And yesterday and today has been a beautiful unfolding of me getting to settle down into knowing this for myself on an even deeper level. And I want to share that. I want to share this energy that I'm sitting in right now, because it really does feel like total well-being, like all is well in the whole universe and all the universes. Like everything is going so well. The world is better than it's ever been. The universe is better than it's ever been. Every single corner of life in this universe or any universe, everything is as good as it has ever been and getting better. And how much our lives are a reflection of that is a reflection of our filter, our perspective, and that's the part where we have autonomy, we have sovereignty over our filter. When we think about self-empowerment and what that really means as far as like the power that you hold as a being, I mean, exercising that power happens inside of ourselves, and we exercise that power by choosing to shape our filter in a way that serves us, choosing to practice perspectives that serve us and that feel good when we think about them. That's why, like, in this podcast, the better I feel, the more I want to milk it. I want to get good at feeling this good. I don't want it to be a fluke thing. I want to feel this good more and more and more. So when I'm here, I milk it and I practice it. And that is how it gets easier and easier and easier. Speaking of, so I do journal pretty basically every day, at least something, some little thing. Some days more than others, and some seasons more than others, but I like to check in and put something on paper at least every day, even if it's just a couple things I'm grateful for. And long story, which, I mean, that's kind of the whole theme of this podcast anyway, I guess. So yesterday I had my my session with my life coach, Melissa, and she had put the Asteroid Palace, Pallus, Palace, like Dallas, but well, I guess not exactly like Dallas, kind of like Dallas, but with a P and a U, basically the same. It's not my best work, but that's okay. So, yesterday on my chart, while I was talking to Melissa, she had added the Asteroid Palace onto the chart, and I had never paid attention to this asteroid in astrology before, or its mythology, its story. But basically, it's a leadership archetype. It represents how we solve problems, what our problem solving faculties look like. So, the sign that your palace is in is telling us a lot about when we come into a situation with the unknown or we're up against a roadblock, what is our approach gonna look like? And I read through mine and I looked at a few other people's and it seems pretty accurate. So that was really cool, mainly because it's basically the only thing that I have in Aquarius. And through that conversation, we figured out that Pallas makes a return, or it makes a whole lap around the sun in 4.6 years. So every 4.6 years, Pallas comes back to where it was when you were born. And I had my Pallas return. It was back in that spot in Aquarius where it was when I was born, February 5th of 2021, so earlier this year. And this is the random story. Like, randomly yesterday, Melissa introduces me to this. Randomly this morning, I look and figure out the exact date when it was when I had this loop back around. And this kind of empowerment of my leadership archetype, when Pallas makes its return, or really when anything makes its return, when it comes back to the spot it was when you were born, it enlivens it, it invigorates it, it gives it an energy boost where it's like raising its profile in your overall energy field, where it just becomes more obvious, more pronounced. And so when I saw that that was February 5th, and I know I started my podcast February 28th, just a couple weeks after that, I was like, interesting. I want to go back to my journals and I want to flip through the time, like the few weeks leading up to February 5th and then the few weeks after February 5th leading up to starting the podcast. I want to see like what kinds of things I was going through at that time. And wow, it was so powerful because I feel like reading back through that feels like a whole different lifetime. And it was 6.5 months ago. So there's that. It was crazy, the things that I was contemplating, and it was it was very cool to see how far I'd come, especially where like this year 2021 is my year of speaking truth. That was the mantra that I set at the beginning of the year. So every day when I journal, I write the date, I write the day of the week, and I write 2021, the year of speaking truth. And it just is like a little reminder every day that this is an intention that my soul gave me that feels important for this whole year, is to speak my truth. And in the beginning of February, I was very much I was very surprised at how that journey was going at that time, because I thought the year of speaking truth was going to be about speaking my truth. And as it turned out, the first part of speaking my truth was knowing what my truth was. And when I set out January 1st with the mantra, the year of speaking truth, I didn't know what my truth was, so there was no way I was going to be able to say it out loud. Like, that makes logical sense to me now. I didn't know what it was, though, which was surprising. And so amazing, so beneficial. And where I was February 5th was making peace with something. Like, when I go back to like those couple of days leading up to February 5th, like February 2nd to February 5th was a very powerful aha moment in I know I talked on a recent episode, I'm not sure which one it was, but about ghosting my friend at the beginning of the year. And where I was at the end of January, early February, was making peace with my intuition and realizing on a deeper level or more clearly that basically this situation with my friend was my intuition telling me something and giving me the guidance to do something and take an action that I had no conscious understanding yet to understand why my intuition wants me to do what it's telling me to do. And so then I have to make a choice, like in my conscious mind, I can't justify doing this. I can't prove why this is the right thing to do, but my gut is telling me this is what you need to do. And I was doing it, which was really cool. I was following my gut, but the fact that my conscious mind didn't understand was creating a lot of anxiety. And that was like that month of January where I was doing what my gut was telling me, but I was kind of fighting it along the way by second guessing and worrying like, is this the right thing? I don't want to get this wrong. I don't want to hurt somebody unnecessarily. Like, what if my gut isn't right? What if I can't trust it like I think I can? Like, I was still asking myself all these questions, even though I was listening to my guidance and I was doing what it was telling me to do. So, in that first month of the year in January, I was struggling. I was struggling with my intuition. I wanted to know why. I was like demanding the evidence of like why had my inner being reached this conclusion and given me this guidance to do this thing of like don't talk to that friend anymore. Why was my inner being telling me that? Because in my conscious mind it didn't make any sense. And that was an uneasy feeling, and it became really obvious to me in that example that I wasn't trusting my intuition like, you're quote unquote supposed to. And really, I wasn't trusting my intuition as much as I could have been. Because theoretically, I also believe that our inner being or the emotions that we feel or the intuition that we feel, like those are messages like the game of hot cold, like hotter, 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 colder, colder, colder. Like it's guidance, it's leading us to where we want to be. Our inner being is us. And if it's telling us to stop doing something, I know on a theoretical level that my inner being has a broader perspective than I do because my inner being is talking to source energy, and source energy is infinite intelligence, can see everything, can see how everything connects and the path that's unfolding everywhere, and knows the dominant well-being of this universe. So it's one thing to know that on a theoretical level, to know that my inner being is me, my inner being is an extension of source energy, my inner being is leading me to what my highest self wants. And then my conscious mind, my human mind, my ego mind is like throwing a temper tantrum, like creating all this anxiety, demanding to be filled in on the bigger picture. And it was making for a rough ride. And so, starting about February 2nd or 3rd, I just realized like there was almost like a surrender to my own intuition. There was like, I don't need to worry about this. My intuition is giving me the bottom line answer, and that's good enough for me. And to go back and read that, I mean, at this point, 6.5 months later, it feels like I've practiced that now to a point where I don't even really remember what it was like when I didn't trust my intuition like this. And that's how fast our abilities can evolve, like, and something that looks like a hard situation, like, diverging from an important friendship, that was hard. It was rough to live through. It felt tangled and it felt like this has resistance in it. I know for a fact that I could feel the resistance in this situation. And it's just one of those examples of like, it's not the path of no resistance, it's the path of least resistance. And this is source leading you through your path of least resistance. The fact that this is a high resistance moment says something about how much resistance you're still holding on to. So, yeah, like it was such a release. It was such a powerful moment there in early February where I gave myself over to my own guidance, my own internal emotional guidance. If my gut says this is wrong, I believe that. I trust it. And I still, like it all works in levels. We circle around the same issues. So, I mean, I still face opportunities even now, 6.5 months later, and probably for the rest of my life, if I had to guess. But I am still facing opportunities to practice trusting what my gut is telling me to do. And this is reminding me of, well, and I know I talked about last week with the board that I resigned from. And that same day, we did an interview where we hired a new full-time person for the grocery store that allowed me to no longer work at the grocery store and no longer manage the weekends, no longer have hours on the schedule. So in that interview last week with this full-time hire, it was such a fascinating next chapter in following my guidance because my guidance told me two different things. First, basically from meeting this person, which I mean, I work to keep an open mind always, but my gut was like an instant no on he's not going to be a good fit. And I keep an open mind. And then, it occurs back to me that the store manager, Jeff, he really liked him. He had a good feeling. They had a long first interview. It was a good conversation. And he wanted to move forward with him. And my gut, in addition to being like, hard no, this is not going to work out, also said, let it happen because this isn't your lesson. This is Jeff's lesson. And that really, as far as Jeff and I's relationship and working together and our souls evolving side by side, it was the right thing to, yes, it's a hard no. It's not going to work out, but we're still going to do it. We're still going to go through these steps and get the good out of this experience. And so the first day, the guy is scheduled to work. I do believe it was 11 to 7. And he came, he was a few minutes late and he stayed for about an hour and then he went home sick. And he was told he needed to come back Tuesday, which wasn't supposed to be one of his days, but he did. And he stayed for a few hours and did his training on the register so that he could still close on Thursday. And on Thursday, he showed up and he stayed for about 3 hours and then left several hours early and didn't end up getting the rest of his training that day. And his reason that day was also that he was sick with more issues. And he was like, but I swear I'll be there tomorrow. I'll be there Friday. I'll work my whole, 11 to 7 and I'll close and I got this. Like, you can count on me. No call, no show on Friday. God damn it. God damn it. So that happened. And it was interesting. It was very interesting yesterday watching the end of this happen so fast. The first interview was only like a week and a half ago when Jeff met him. I met him about a week ago, and then he lasted less than a week at the store, like 3 shifts. I think it totaled 7.5 hours that he worked there. So he missed more time than he actually worked, and then he no call, no showed on his 3rd day. And yeah, so it didn't work out. So my gut knew that. And yet the conversation that Jeff and I had yesterday, we were on the phone for like an hour talking about how all of this went and how we're going to move forward and like sub in other employees. We have other new hires that started at this time. Every time, the kids go back to school, there's a big change in like turnover in the schedule. And so we have lots of new hires at this time. And so how are we going to, make the puzzle work? And I think it's all going to work out for the best. But I thought that that was really interesting, where my gut said it was a no, but my gut also said do it anyway. So sometimes I think it's like that. Sometimes I think that it's not supposed to be a straight line from where you are to the perfect answer to the question. I think there's often little mini detours along the way that are absolutely divinely intended to guide our soul's evolution. Those detours are just as important as getting to the final destination. So there was that example. It's also reminding me along those same lines of my gut told me it's bad, but do it anyway. The morning of the board meeting where I ended up resigning my seat, I told you guys I had seen the email the night before that we're gonna talk about this issue, and I knew that this is about me, and I just knew that, like, if they want to force it, then I'm gonna resign. And so that morning of that meeting, going into it, I was doing my morning time, and I was inspired to get out my pendulum, and I was asking it some questions about the situation. And if you're not familiar with a pendulum, it's a tool for divination. You can ask it yes no questions. And mine, basically, when you get your pendulum, you hold it and let it dangle and make it still so it's not moving. And then you tell it, show me a yes. And for mine, it moves left to right. And then you say, show me a no. And mine moves like up, like away from my body and towards my body, like perpendicular to me. And so that's how mine works. And so along the questioning that I was doing towards the board meeting and this day and all of these things, I asked my pendulum, is this meeting going to end in me resigning my seat? It's a very straightforward question. And the pendulum said no. And I felt instant relief at knowing that this is not going to end in me resigning my seat. We're going to find a peaceful resolution to whatever it is that they're wanting to talk about, that they put this on the agenda. And I felt great. I felt so much better knowing that that wasn't going to be what it was. So relieved. And then we all know how it worked out. And I was talking to Melissa about it yesterday and was expressing how grateful I was that my pendulum lied to me. Like, basically, when I work with my intuition, when I draw my tarot cards, when I ask my pendulum things, I do have an underlying request of not necessarily like give me the answer, but give me the answer that will serve my highest good right now. And that is very much baked into my intention when I work with those divine messages. I want to know, like, what will serve me the best right now? From where I am right now, what do I need to know? And so I didn't say that in that question, but that's always present. And so when I asked my question, is this meeting going to end in me resigning my seat? The pendulum said, nope. And I am so glad that it did that, because that agenda item was like 50 minutes into the meeting. So if I had gotten a yes from my pendulum, if it had said like, yes, you are going to resign when we get to this agenda item, oh my God, I would have had to sit there for 50 minutes and think like, what am I going to say? What are they going to say? It would have been so anxiety inducing. And because my pendulum had told me no, I just like took a huge exhale and chilled the fuck out and was like happy to be there. Like, this is what I'm doing today. And I don't particularly enjoy these meetings, but I made a gratitude list while it was going on. And I got a lot of good stuff on the gratitude list. So that was productive. And yeah, so that just so many examples of source leading us through the path of least resistance. Like, I asked that question to the pendulum, am I going to resign my seat in this meeting? And source didn't give me the right answer because that wasn't the path of least resistance. I was trying to know something that was going to make it harder to go through the next hour of my life, and Source didn't let that happen. You know, like the pendulum said no. The pendulum reassured me that this is not going to go down like that, so don't even worry about it. And I didn't. And then it did. And because I hadn't been all balled up and worry and anxiety about it for the first 50 minutes of that meeting, when it happened, I was very relaxed. It was very easy and simple and easy peasy, no hard feelings. This is the way it is. This is my truth. And speaking my truth was so easy because I hadn't overthought it. I hadn't tried to get out in front of where this moment was. Like, I came to the moment totally open and relaxed, and the words came out of me so simply, and it was exactly how it was supposed to go. So yeah, I practice that intention, and I invite you, if it feels good, to do that as well. As far as like anytime you're working with your dreams or setting intentions to figure things out or work with shadow pieces or anything where you're moving into a growth space, always bake in that intention. Like, I want what's going to serve my highest good right now. Because a lot of times we ask for things that we think we want from our limited perspective, and from broader perspective, our inner being doesn't take us there because that's really not what we wanted. You know, like, our inner being is hooked up with the larger part of who we are, our whole soul, like our soul that is this was in Dolores Cannon's book, the three waves of volunteers, I think. Yeah, 3 waves of volunteers. She talked about, like, the goal is to merge back with your whole soul, and that the whole soul is much too large to fit into a human body. If you tried to put all of that energy of your whole soul into your human body, it would explode. So, and the body would be destroyed. So there's only a portion of our soul's energy residing in our body. And more and more and more, as we open our receptivity channels, we get to merge back into the energy of our whole soul. And totally lost like where I was going with any of that, but that's totally fine. That's like, there you go. There's all those things. Yesterday was an amazing day overall. Like 20 minutes before my session with Melissa, I randomly had the thought to Google Open G Identity Center Human Design. So in the human design system, there are 9 energy centers. I talked on a couple episodes ago about the 9 energy centers if you're interested in that. And I personally have 7 open centers in my chart. And for whatever reason, the inspiration that came was specifically to look at the Open G Identity Center. And so I spent the 20 minutes before my session with Melissa reading all about living with an open identity center. And it was absolutely fascinating along my journey of working out all of this karmic healing, I guess I want to call it, with my mom and my mother wound and those dreams that I had a while back, and now this stuff coming up with my cousin, and it all feels so connected. And out of that general sense of how connected this all was, I was inspired to research the Open Identity Center and see what that's all about. And so I'm going to read you guys some stuff because it was pretty mind-blowing. So the self, or the G center in human design, is one of the most important centers. It gives us access to our sense of direction, purpose, and love of life. the center where the soul is located. I've read that on a few different places. It refers to it as the seat of the soul is our identity center. Basically, who are you? When you have a defined G or self center, you normally know where you are going and are consistently connected with the ways of the world. Your role is to give love. Your sense of self is pretty solid and you know where you are going, even if you are not quite sure yet how you are getting there. When you have an open G center, so this is like what mine is, it is similar to living as a chameleon. As the chameleon moves from one environment to another, its natural camouflage of changing colors kicks in, and it begins to change its colors to fit in wherever it is. If you have an open G center, you do the same. You can fit in wherever you are. And this is a different article, and I'm going to post both of these links. If you have an open identity center on your human design chart, I highly recommend you look into this. Okay, so this next one, there's probably no more empathetic or vulnerable part of the design than when this center is open or undefined. Someone who has the open G is influenced at birth forward by the identities of those around them. Early on, they can be swayed, pressured, and conditioned to be someone they are not. Their openness, that white diamond at the center of the chart, is like a portal. It can get clogged with their parents' ideas of who they should be. It can be overly influenced to aspire to be just like an older sibling or maybe the opposite of what they represent. But the beauty of the open G is to be empathetic and recognize aspects of others' individuality, so what comes forth are the aspects that resonate on a deeper level. Basically, the way I understand that is that essentially you're in a dressing room trying on like a whole pile of different clothes, and at the end of it, you walk away with the ones that you like. You don't buy all the clothes, you only keep the ones that were flattering for you, that worked on your figure or whatever. So as a chameleon, as an open identity person, you can try on a lot of different identities, a lot of different personality traits, and you get to feel for yourself inside of each one of those, which ones of these resonate on a deeper level with who my soul is. And through going through the buffet over and over and over again and trying all of these different dishes, you figure out what your identity is, and you know it for rock solid eventually because you tasted everything that you're not. You know what you do want because you know what you don't want. So it's all a process of trial and error, essentially. But continuing reading here. But like a window, the identity of an open G can become smudged. Because of this, the person with an open G needs to take care to shield and even coddle their openness. Comfort is a big factor. The size, the design, and the layout of the rooms they spend time in are very important to the open G. They need to be comfortable in their surroundings. An open G that walks into a house or restaurant that is not designed to their comfort will want to leave. They know right away whether it is or not. This is an energetic thing that only they can know for themselves. If you are with an open G, then it is important for you to respect that openness and help comfort the G. Take the seat at the table that they shy away from. Don't force the open G to move into an apartment or house that they are having second thoughts about. If they are not comfortable there now, they never will be. This comfort that the open G seeks is also a barometer. When the open G finds its place of comfort, then it is in the flow of humanity. Like the flow of the river, if they are comfortable, then they will be in the right place at the right time to meet the right people and have the right experiences to move them forward on their path in life. So open identity, it's basically, it can be a little bit frustrating before you get there, but it's also said to be like such a magical thing when an open identity center person gets to the life stage of knowing their identity and living openly in their unique identity. There's like nothing more magical. So it's a process. It's a process of not knowing who you are and at times potentially getting lost in trying to be someone else and forgetting that you're not them, you're trying on their identity. And at any point, you can take off the pieces that don't work for you and move on with the ones that do. You can appreciate the pieces that you figured out about yourself because of your relationship with that person and still leave behind all the pieces that they had that you didn't want to take with you. You know, whether you took one of their pieces or 99% of their pieces, the ones that don't fit you, there's no guilt. There's no obligation to hold on to those. And this piece, this understanding about this open identity center, especially the part where it was like you can become conditioned to strive to be just like an older sibling. And I don't have an older sibling, but I do have my cousin who's my partner at the store, Chad. And his and I's relationship, I've shared before, it has karmic roots. It has roots in our past lives. And because of everything that unpacked yesterday around everything, and then all of the morning time I had done so far this morning, all of a sudden I was inspired to pull Chad and I's synastry chart, which when you're looking at natal chart, that's one person's birth placements as far as like where were the planets, the day you were born, the time when you were born. A natal chart shows one person. And when you do a synastry chart, it has two wheels on top of each other, basically, that show here's one person's placements compared to the other person's placements. So, for example, he and I both have a few planets in Sagittarius. We both have some stuff in Scorpio. We both have stuff in Taurus. We both have a little bit in Aquarius. Like, you get to see side by side what are your placements compared to this other person, because even if you don't know anything about natal charts, if you're familiar with aura or energy at all, you know that my energy plus your energy makes its own third energy. There's a whole different entity of the energy of the relationship. And so a synastry chart attempts to reach for what is the energy of this relationship. And it shows how are you guys likely to push each other's buttons? How are you likely to encourage each other to grow? How are you likely to stimulate healing in the other person? It's a maze of figuring out, you know, not only how is my energy wired, how is his energy wired, but how are our respective energies going to play together. And looking at our synastry chart was absolutely mind-bending. I feel like it revolutionized my entire world outlook, because for so long I have thought of myself as the one having a hard time in this relationship between him and I. And reading about the synastry aspects that we have between our two energies, I think it might be possible that he's having the harder time and not me. I think I'm the one that's more in control and more able to set the tone, and like take the reins of my own empowerment and take responsibility for my own feelings, which is, oh my goodness, bringing out one of my favorite things from yesterday. Was in my session with Melissa, and we were talking about my cousin and how there are times when we're on the opposite sides of an issue, and it gives me a lot of anxiety to disappoint him or let him down or have disharmony in our relationship. I don't like it. And you know, Melissa was kind of like asking me questions and pulling at threads, and got around to like, do you think that you're seeking his approval? And I'm like, well, yeah, I just don't know how to stop. And so she reflects, she's like, I think it's possible that like grown-ass woman Carly isn't seeking his approval and isn't worried about upsetting him or disappointing him. I think little girl Carly is the one that's worried about those things. And this kind of goes back to looking through my journals from the beginning of this year. I got multiple readings from different friends who do that. And gave myself some readings, and inner child work came up in multiple of these readings. And so far this year, I've really only looked at it from the perspective of my inner mother voice that is able to talk to me. And I work to call in my inner mother instead of my inner critic in times when I'm beating up on myself. And last night, after the conversation with Melissa, and we'd had this conversation about little girl Carly, and she's the one that's afraid. She's the one that has this fear. And it really sank in that, like, little girl Carly has the fear of upsetting Chad because her open identity center had no other option. Like, he felt like the best option to follow in his footsteps, felt like a secure path forward. So without him, she didn't have any idea what her identity was. He was the closest and really only example in her life that she saw that felt like I could walk in these footsteps and get really, really close to who I'm trying to be. And she clung to Chad as a role model because of that, because he basically filled in really, really well her open identity center and gave her something of a direction to work towards where she didn't have anything of her own at that point. Little girl Carly was just clueless. She was a blank slate, which was on purpose by design, but she hadn't figured out any of these coping skills. She hadn't built up her own self-worth and her self-esteem like grown-ass woman Carly has. And so last night, after all of this unfolded yesterday, I was in my process here last night, and was doing a little bit of journaling and realized a piece of truth that I think I've been kind of pushing down under the surface. I let it come up. I wrote it in my journal. And as I realized that truth, there was some fear around it. And I realized, like, that fear around it was why I had kept pushing it back down. But the fear around it said, what if Chad gets mad at me? Like, what if this happens? And if that happens, like, Chad's going to be mad. So I was worried about setting off a chain reaction of things that was going to make Chad mad at me. And that all by itself is not unusual. I have that anxiety loop of what if Chad gets mad at me? I have that in my mind. I tell that story to myself. But what was new last night was, instead of the story ending right there, what if Chad gets mad at me, and then looping around that over and over and over again, I recognized that grown-ass woman Carly isn't scared of Chad, isn't scared of disappointing him, isn't scared of letting him down, isn't scared of losing him as a role model. Grown-ass woman Carly is confident in herself. This fear that worries, what if Chad gets mad at me? That's little girl Carly. That's her popping her little head up and having her fear. And in the past, even, like, before yesterday, the past, so long ago, when I would worry about making him mad at me, I would give myself this beating, basically this mental beating of, like, why do you care about this? Just freaking forget about it. Like, don't worry about him. Like, who cares what he thinks? Like, just totally, like, rip this fear down. Like, it's invalid. Like, quit it. And the whole time, that's little girl Carly coming to me with this fear. And she says, I'm afraid of what if he gets mad at me. And instead of showing her any compassion, I was beating up on her for being afraid and telling her she's ridiculous. And last night, I didn't. Last night, I energetically put grown-ass woman Carly's arm around little girl Carly's shoulders and hugged her and told her, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be uncertain about what happens if the worst. What if the worst happens, and the unfolding that comes from that? What about that? What if that happens? I'm scared. I don't think I'm prepared for that. I don't think I'm ready. I don't think I'll survive that unfolding. Little girl Carly, she's afraid. And I told her that I get it. I get why it feels that way. I get that without his leadership, you're very lost. And so it feels important to preserve that relationship. I understand that. And you're right that using him as your role model and following in his footsteps, that served us well. It taught us so many valuable things. And you're right, he is important. Like, good call. Like, even little girl Carly knew that he's got it a lot figured out. This is going to help me get really, really close to who I'm trying to be, even though I have no fucking idea who that is. And then I started sharing with her all of the coping skills, all of the tools that I've learned that I didn't know when I was 6. I didn't know. Little girl Carly didn't have any of these things. So I told her, everything's always working out for us. Even when somebody gets mad at us, that's still everything always working out for us. And we've grown. We are solid, standing in our truth and knowing what that is and knowing who we are and knowing what our soul came forward to do. Like, we're living that right now. And if my cousin gets mad at me, if he gets mad at us, I'm telling little girl Carly, if he gets mad at us, that's okay, because we'll get through it together. We'll get through it with our support system that we've built, because we're not standing there empty-handed like we were back when I was 6. I'm standing here today with a whole toolbox full of things. And consoling and counseling little girl Carly and informing her of how far we've come, that this is not 1994, like, you're not 6 years old. I understand that the feelings were so hard at that age that there was a freezing that happened. And so that's why, little girl Carly and grown woman Carly are having this conversation. But it literally felt like there was a release, that there was a release of, all of a sudden, she wasn't alone anymore. She wasn't clinging to Chad as a role model because she was alone. If she didn't have that, she wasn't alone. She had me. Little girl Carly had me on her side, supporting her in her fear and her anxiety and comforting her back into a place of feeling secure in this now moment. I gave that to myself, to my inner mother, counseled my inner child in that moment. And there was healing. There was absolutely a shifting in the vibration between Chad and I, in terms of the karmic healing that he and I are here to create together for each of us. I just, it suddenly made sense that anytime I have an anxiety or a fear that plays in my head, that's not him being an aggressor in my world. That's little girl Carly telling me that she's afraid that she's going to be alone again. And she's terrified. She doesn't want to be alone. That's scary. And I remember how scary it was and how much of a relief it felt like to have Chad's example to follow. And it did. It served me really well. And now I've built up a recognition of my own identity such that I am comfortable, even on my little girl Carly level, I'm comfortable letting go of needing his approval, of needing to maintain harmony in that relationship. I have my own self-worth that derives from inside of me, not from that relationship. And that is brand new territory. That's like brand new territory, brand spanking new. And so all of that goes into so perfectly. I'm going to leave you with this. 3 things. 1, I drew out of the mermaid jar to help kind of pull all of these threads together. I pulled a tarot card, just one. I drew something out of the mermaid jar, and there's a quote that really stood out to me from listening to the 3 Waves of Volunteers book this morning by Dolores Cannon. So out of the mermaid jar, I drew a slip that says fear, aka holding yourself back, which basically, as I understand it, the only thing that ever holds us back is ourselves and the stories that we tell ourselves, which is perfect segue to the quote from The Three Waves of Volunteers by Dolores Cannon. She's gridlocked with fear and uncertainty. It's her perception, the old tapes she listens to that play over and over in her mind. And for me, one of those tapes has been, what if this makes Chad mad at me? And little girl Carly plays that tape over and over and over, and it guides her vote in how we make decisions. She is not willing to lose this role model because he's important to her. But last night, I got on her side and I assured her that he is not her only ally, that I am her ally and that I have her best interest at heart. And if we get our feelings hurt, if we get wounded along the way, that I have tools that can help us, that can act as soothing medicine to those burns if that's the way that it unfolds. There's nothing to fear. I got this. And she believed me. So we're on our way. We're on our way to a reconciliation, my inner mother and my inner child. And the last one is the tarot card. I drew Major Arcana 18, the moon. So I'm going to read you that from the Light Seers Tarot. And if you would like to see the card, which is absolutely beautiful, you can check that out on my Instagram at Owning Authenticity. So the keywords of the moon are illusions, hidden truths, the unknown, trusting your intuition, facing your fears, the watery nature of the unconscious mind, mystery, symbolism and metaphor, perception, uncertainty, and dreams. When we're faced with uncertainty and illusion, it can feel like we are drowning. Trust that you will be okay, even if you can't seem to distinguish up from down right now. When you stop struggling to see that which you simply cannot see because it remains obscured behind shadows of the moonlight, you will experience a deep release that will allow you to float to the surface of your truth. The moon card asks you to go within, find comfort in the darkness, and to calmly listen to the whispers of your own intuition. There is divinity and magic here. When you fall into the moon's still waters, your inner wisdom will embrace you and push you toward your light. She will reinvigorate your creativity and resurrect your spark as long as you go beyond your own fears to find her. Dive into her healing embrace, breathe past insecurities, and let her dimly lit magic guide you home. I am safe, and I reach new levels of unconscious knowing as I surrender to the will of the universe. And what does it mean to surrender to the will of the universe? I feel like I've been seeing that message a lot lately, and it finally clicked this morning, going back through my journals, back to the experience of, diverging from that friendship at the beginning of the year. With my intuition was telling me the right thing to do, and my conscious mind was caught up in what it thought it knew. And even so, I've built the trust in my intuition that I followed it, even though I made the journey harder on myself than it needed to be by questioning. My conscious mind was questioning all along the way, wanting proof and evidence that this was the right move. And finally, around the time of my palace return, as it turns out, the beginning of February, I sank into trusting my intuition on a deeper level, because all of the questioning that my conscious mind was doing wasn't doing anything to help me get clearer. It was only muddying the waters. It was only making me feel anxious and worried. And I finally decided to let go. That if this is what my intuition is telling me, that's good enough for me. A negative emotion is like our inner being telling us, hey, by the way, you got your hand on a hot stove and it's burning you. And if you don't want your hand burned off, get it off the stove. And when my intuition told me, diverge from this relationship, don't respond to that message. Just let it go. Let this be the end of that. Let this be the end of that cycle. My inner being was telling me, your hand's on the hot stove. And my conscious mind was like, where? Where is it on the hot stove? Show me. Show me this stove. Show me my hand on the stove. I don't think so. I don't see my hand on a hot stove. And even though I was taking my hand off the hot stove, I was like desperate to put it back on there because I couldn't see it, even though I knew it was hurting me on a deep enough level for my intuition to be telling me that. I think you guys can hear that. I'm pretty sure I've heard that on a recording before. That just means I hit 55 minutes and it's telling me, hey, you're about to run out of time here. Don't risk your brilliance not being captured on tape. Like, switch to a new recording if you need to. I don't know that I need to. I feel pretty good about this. I feel pretty good about ending on this place of fear is not the monster that we make it out to be. We think it's this big, scary monster haunting us in our deepest, darkest nightmares. And as it turns out, it's little girl Carly. It's little girl Carly wanting to crawl into bed with me because she's afraid of the dark, because she doesn't know. She doesn't know what I know. And last night, for the first time, I embraced her. I truly embraced my fear and what it was telling me about the fragmented parts of myself. I welcomed home another fragmented part of myself because the fear arose and let me know that this was out there in the cold and I could welcome it home, that this was work that was there ready to happen. And I am going to end with just a piece of gratitude for where I am at this moment. Yesterday, the I Learned podcast crossed over the 500 listens mark, meaning that between all of these 56 episodes to date, there have been 500 listens on those episodes, and that feels amazing. That feels like my soul witnessing its own purpose in real time. And I thank you for listening. I say that every single time because I genuinely feel alive through this expression of the energy flowing through me. So I thank you for listening. And I feel like I continue to step further and further into my self-empowerment as I've now reached, yesterday was day 11 of no alcohol and day 9 of practicing a daily yoga practice. I do an at-home practice where I watch a YouTube video, and I really enjoy Yoga with Adrienne. It's a YouTube channel and she has lots of videos on there. She's been posting yoga videos onto YouTube for about 8 years now, I think. And she put out a series, actually it was 7 months ago, so right around this time of like January, February, she put out a series called Breath, and it's a 30-day yoga journey towards connecting with this tool of your breath. And she says over and over again, yesterday was day 4, I did the day 4 video, and she says over and over that our breath is a tool, that it's always there for us, that it never leaves us, that it is something that is rock solid that we can count on. And so far in these videos, she's basically teaching how to slow down and how to connect with the breath, how to allow the breath to guide my movement and my momentum, and to allow the breath to tune me into my body and to listen more to what my body is telling me. It's absolutely beautiful. So maybe if you're like me, I've been thinking for months, like maybe even years. I had a developed yoga practice there at one point, and I got away from it without really meaning to. And then, I've been doing yoga for 9 days. It was a few days before that I had a session with someone who found yoga 3 years ago and has practiced every day, and it's like changed her life, quote unquote. And it just renewed my spirit to reconnect with my yoga practice, and I am absolutely loving it here Today will be day 10, and I just want to keep counting and see how high I can get just for the fun of it. So if you've been, kind of laying the groundwork, maybe leaning back towards some kind of yoga practice, meditation practice, exercise practice of any kind, maybe this is the spark that lights that fire for you. So until next time, dear friends, I thank you for listening. Take good care, and so will I.